The wind carried the scent of salt and longing across the quiet boardwalk. Waves crashed softly in the distance, their rhythms syncing with the slow beating of a lonely heart. The town of Clearwater Bay was winding down for the evening. Cafes dimming their lights. Children chasing the last glow of sunset. But one girl sat alone on a weathered wooden bench, her gaze fixed on the endless horizon. Her name was Elena Rivera. She looked like someone the ocean had claimed a piece of, delicate, distant, and quietly wounded. A thin cardigan clung to her shoulders, her hair tangled slightly by the sea breeze. She wasn't there for the view. She was there because she had nowhere else to be. The bench had become her refuge in recent weeks, the only place where she could think without breaking. It was where she came after a job at the small coastal cafe, after plastering on smiles for tourists who would leave the next morning, while she stayed behind. Trapped in the stillness of a town that knew all her heartbreaks, the seagulls called overhead, their cries fading into the darkening sky. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the whisper of waves. Sometimes she pretended the ocean was listening to, that if she spoke softly enough, it would understand. But tonight, the silence was heavier. The bench felt colder. The world seemed smaller. She rubbed her palms together, not just for warmth, but to remind herself she was still here. That life hadn't entirely forgotten her. The flicker of a nearby streetlight cast her shadow onto the sand, long, fragile, and wavering. That's when she noticed him, a figure walking slowly down the beach path, tall, broad-shouldered, his movements steady but distant, as if each step carried a story of its own. He wore a dark hoodie, his hands buried in the pockets, eyes downcast until he saw her. Their eyes met for less than a second, but it was enough. Something invisible shifted, like the wind had paused just for them. Hesitate then continued walking, stopping a few feet away from her bench. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the sound of waves filled the space between them. Elena tried to look away, but curiosity rooted her in place. There was something about him, not just his quietness, but the weight he carried. People who've been broken recognize each other, even in silence. He finally spoke, his voice calm but deep, carrying a trace of exhaustion. "You always sit here this late." She blinked, unsure if she should answer. "Sometimes," she said softly. "It's quieter when everyone's gone." He nodded, his gaze shifting to the horizon. "Yeah, the ocean doesn't judge." The response made her chest tighten, because he understood. She didn't even know his name, yet his words felt like something she'd been waiting to hear. Minutes passed, but they didn't feel awkward. Just quiet, comfortable, in an unfamiliar way. After a while, he sat down. Not beside her, but a respectful distance away, as if afraid to disturb her solitude. The bench creaked softly under his weight. They both stared ahead at the water, at the night that was slowly swallowing the last bit of gold from the sky. He took a slow breath. "You from here?" She nodded. "Born and raised. Feels like I never left." "Why would you want to?" he asked, glancing at her briefly. She gave a small, humorless laugh, because sometimes staying means watching everything you love disappear one by one. His eyes softened. "Yeah, I get that." Something about his tone made her turn to him. "You sound like you've lost something too." He looked at the sand beneath his shoes. "Someone," he corrected quietly. That word hung between them, raw and unfinished. Elena didn't push. She knew better than to ask questions that reopened wounds. But for some reason, she wanted to know everything about him. Who he lost, what brought him here, and why his sadness mirrored hers so perfectly. The waves rolled closer, licking the edge of the boardwalk. He finally looked at her. "What about you? You come here to remember someone?" She hesitated. "No, to forget." Their eyes met again. Longer this time. No words needed. The ocean spoke for them. The night grew colder, the sky painted in deep indigo. The streetlights flickered along the boardwalk, reflecting off the puddles from the afternoon rain. He stood suddenly, shoving his hands deeper into his pockets. "I should go." Before she could stop herself, she asked, "Wait, what's your name?" He turned, half smiling. "Noah." She repeated it softly. No, something about it felt right. Familiar, even though they'd just met. He nodded once and walked away, his footsteps fading against the wooden planks. Elena watched him disappear into the shadows, her heart strangely heavier and lighter. At the same time, when he was gone, she realized she was smiling for the first time in weeks. Not a big smile, just enough to remind her that she could still feel. The next evening, she came back to the same bench, half hoping, half pretending not to. The sea breeze was softer, the air still humming with yesterday's memory. She waited. Minutes turned to hours. And then there he was, walking the same path, same hoodie, same quiet presence. When he saw her, his lips twitched into the faintest grin. "Guess you're still here?" She shrugged. "Guess so." This time, when he sat down, it was a little closer. The waves broke rhythmically beside them, as if the world approved of their quiet reunion. They didn't talk much, just small exchanges about the sea, the cafe where she worked, the music he listened to when he couldn't sleep. But it didn't matter. What mattered was the silence between them, soft, unspoken, sacred. By the time the moon rose, Elena realized something she hadn't felt in a long time. She wasn't alone anymore, and though she didn't know it, yet, that one small encounter. The stranger. The Ben Dikietsea would soon change both their lives forever. The next few days passed in a blur of salt air and quiet anticipation. Elena found herself looking forward to every evening. Not because of the sunset or the ocean, but because of him. Noah always came, always at the same time, as if drawn to that bench by something he couldn't explain. Their conversations started simple. Coffee, music, the best time to watch the tide roll in. But beneath every word was an undercurrent of something deeper, something waiting to surface. Elena didn't ask about his past again. She could feel the pain sitting in his silence, heavy and patient, like waves that never stopped returning to shore. Sometimes they didn't talk at all. They just sat there, two strangers who had stopped being strangers the moment they shared their quiet. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in fading amber, the air felt different, thick with the promise of a storm. The seagulls had disappeared, the wind rising with restless energy. Elena looked up at the darkening clouds. "It's going to rain," she murmured. Noah tilted his head, eyes on the horizon. "Good," he said softly. "Maybe the rain will wash something away." When the first drop fell, she didn't move. Neither did he. It was as if both had been waiting for the storm. The drizzle turned to a downpour in seconds. Most people would have run for cover, but not them. Elena let the rain soak her hair, slide down her face. It was cold, but it felt alive. Noah stood beside her, drenched, his hoodie clinging to his shoulders, his expression unreadable. Then, suddenly, he spoke, his voice breaking through the roar of the rain. "I used to come here years ago." Elena turned to him, startled. "Here, Clearwater Bay," he nodded. "With her, the person I told you about." For a long time, he said nothing else. The only sound was the rain hitting the boardwalk. "She loved the ocean," he continued quietly. "Said it made her feel small, but safe. I never understood it then." Elena's heart tightened. What happened to her? He took a deep breath, his jaw tensing. "A car accident. 2 years ago. On a night just like this." The words hung heavy between them. The sound of thunder rolled over the horizon. "I thought I could forget," Noah whispered, his voice raw. "But everything here, the rain, the sea, that damn bench, it all reminds me of her." Elena didn't know what to say. She wanted to comfort him, but her own throat felt tight, her own memories surfacing like ghosts. Without thinking, she reached out, her fingers brushing his hand. "Maybe that's why you came back," she said softly. "Not to forget. To forgive yourself a look at air. Really look at." And for the first time, his guarded eyes cracked open. "You sound like her," he said, almost to himself. Lightning flashed, illuminating their faces, two souls, standing in the middle of a storm, drenched in grief and something dangerously close to love. The rain poured harder, washing away everything else. The world, the noise, the years they had lost. Noah suddenly laughed. A hollow, broken sound. You think this means something? Two strangers meeting in the rain. Elena met his gaze. I think it means we both needed to. He stared at her for a long time, his breath unsteady. Then he turned and walked toward the edge of the boardwalk, staring out at the wild sea. The wind whipped his hair, the waves crashing furiously below. Sometimes, he said, his voice nearly drowned by the storm, I feel like if I stand here long enough, she'll come back. Elena joined him, standing shoulder to shoulder, the rain stinging her skin. Maybe she sent me instead. He looked at her, startled, but in her eyes, he saw no pity, only understanding. Something inside him broke then. Quietly, like a tide receding, he closed his eyes and let out a trembling breath. When the thunder faded, they stood in silence, their clothes soaked, the night colder than ever. But somehow, the storm didn't feel cruel anymore. It felt cleansing. By the time the rain began to ease, Noah's shoulders had softened. He turned to her and smiled faintly, the kind of smile that comes after a long, painful truth. You're not who I expected to find here, he said. Elena smiled back, her hair plastered to her face. Maybe you were never supposed to find her again. Maybe you were supposed to find yourself. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. You talked like you figured it all out. She looked at the ocean, her expression wistful. No, I just stopped running from the things that hurt. The clouds began to part, the moon peeking through in silver streaks. The storm was ending, but something had shifted between them, within them. They walked together toward the cafe, their shoes splashing through puddles. The town looked different under the soft rainlight, quieter, more alive. When they reached the cafe, Elena paused under the awning. You want some coffee? He hesitated. You sure it's open? She smiled. I work here, remember? Perks of knowing the barista. He followed her inside. The lights flickered on, revealing the cozy warmth of the small seaside cafe. The scent of coffee and salt still lingering. She handed him a towel, and for the first time, he laughed, genuinely. They sat near the window, watching the rain ease into mist. Noah's hands wrapped around the warm mug. I didn't think I could talk about her again, he admitted. You didn't have to, Elena said gently. You just needed to remember her differently. Ace stared at air at the woman who had sat on a bench and somehow turned his silence into peace. Outside, the last raindrops glistened on the glass like tiny stars. He spoke again, almost whispering, I think she'd like you. Elena smiled faintly. I think she'd be glad you're finally living again. They didn't touch. They didn't need to. The space between them was full of loss, of hope, of something unnamed. When Noah finally stood to leave, he paused by the door. Same time tomorrow. She nodded. You know where to find me. The doorbell chimed softly as he stepped back into the night. The air outside smelled of rain and renewal. Elena watched him disappear down the boardwalk, her heart beating in a rhythm she hadn't felt in years. Something was changing, not just for him, but for her too. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every sound of the waves outside her window reminded her of him, his voice, his pain, his quiet laughter. She didn't understand what was happening between them, only that it felt inevitable. The next morning, she walked to the beach earlier than usual. The storm had cleared completely, leaving behind a world washed clean. When she reached the bench, it was empty. She waited 4 minutes, 4 hours. But Noah didn't come. Her stomach tightened. Maybe he needed time. Maybe she'd pushed too far. But when the sun began to dip again, she finally saw him walking toward her. His steps were slower this time, his face serious. When he reached her, he didn't sit down right away. I have to tell you something, he said quietly. Her pulse quickened. What is it? He hesitated. The girl I lost, her name was Lily. She wasn't just someone I loved. He swallowed hard. She was my fiancée. Elena's breath caught. He looked down. The accident? I was driving. I shouldn't have been. We were arguing about something stupid, and I lost control. The words tore out of him like glass. She died because of me. Elena's eyes filled, not with pity, but understanding. She whispered, "And you've been punishing yourself ever since?" He nodded, his shoulders shaking slightly. "I didn't think I deserved to feel anything again, but you make it impossible not to." The confession hung between them, raw and trembling. Elena stood slowly, stepping closer. The wind picked up, lifting strands of her hair across her face. "You can't change what happened," she said softly, "but you can decide what happens next." I met her eyes, and in that moment, something shifted. The pain didn't vanish, but it loosened its grip. A tear slipped down his cheek, but he was smiling, fragile, uncertain, but real. Elena reached up and brushed the tear away with her thumb. "You don't have to carry it alone anymore." He let out a shaky breath. "I don't know if I can stop." "You can start," she whispered. For a long moment, they stood there, the ocean stretching endlessly behind them, the sound of waves filling the spaces between their hearts. Noah finally spoke. "You said you come here to forget." She nodded. He took her hand, tentative, gentle. "Maybe we can help each other remember instead." The touch was electric, not romantic. Not yet. It was human. Healing. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sea in gold and violet, Elena knew that everything had changed. The bench was no longer a place of endings. It had become the start of something fragile, uncertain, and utterly unforgettable. The morning sun spilled over Clearwater Bay in soft golden streaks, turning the wet boardwalk into a ribbon of light. Elena arrived at the bench first, the ocean whispering against the shore, carrying the scent of salt and possibility. She ran a hand over the weathered wood, feeling the grooves beneath her fingers, as if the bench itself remembered the conversations, the storms, the laughter that had begun to weave itself between her and Noah. Noah arrived moments later, his steps light against the damp planks. He offered a quiet nod instead of a smile, and she returned it with one of her own, small, tentative, yet full of unspoken understanding. The morning was crisp, the kind of chill that made you wrap your cardigan tighter around yourself. But when they sat together, the cold felt less sharp, softened by the presence of the other. They didn't speak immediately. The world around them moved in slow, gentle rhythms, waves rolling onto the sand, gulls circling lazily above, distant voices of early fishermen calling across the water. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was rich, filled with the weight of shared experiences yet to be spoken. Elena finally broke it with a soft question. "Do you ever think about how things could have been?" Noah considered the words carefully. "Every day," he admitted. "But I try not to live there. It's hard." But this he gestured subtly toward the ocean, the bench, the air between them. "This feels like a chance to start somewhere else." She nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I know. Sometimes it scares me how quickly it feels like I can trust again." "That's the thing about trust," he said quietly. "It doesn't come in stages. It hits you all at once, or not at all. And I didn't think I'd ever feel it again." Her fingers brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. "I didn't think I'd ever feel understood like this. Not fully, not by anyone." Their eyes met briefly, holding in that gaze all the words neither knew how to say. The wind picked up, carrying sand and the faint tang of sea spray, but neither moved. Each felt very, as if the world had shrunk to only the two of them. Hours passed in quiet companionship. They spoke in small pieces, sharing memories of childhood, favorite books, songs that had once been tied to heartbreak, moments of ridiculous embarrassment, and each time a word was exchanged, a layer of pain peeled away, leaving behind something fragile but unbreakable. Understanding. Noah told her about the nights he had spent staring at the waves after Lily's death, how the sea had become both a comfort and a reminder. Elena listened, offering no judgment, only a sense of presence enough to start filling the empty spaces he had carried for years. In return, she shared her own griefs, the loneliness of a town that watched life go by without her. The quiet ache of parents, long gone. The invisible weight of failed friendships. Noah listened with an intensity that startled her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the need to hide. The sun climbed higher, and the warmth began to pierce the cool morning air. Noah suggested a walk along the beach. They removed their shoes and felt the wet sand shift beneath their feet. Waves lapped at their ankles, sometimes teasing, sometimes steady. Elena found herself laughing more freely than she had in months. Noah's presence was grounding, his quiet words like small anchors in the restless tide of her thoughts. At a certain point, he stopped, picking up a small, smooth stone. He handed it to her. "For luck," he said, "or maybe just to remind you that not everything heavy has to sink." She turned it over in her hand, feeling its weight. "I'll keep it," she said softly, "to remember today." Noah watched her, his expression unreadable. Then, almost shyly, he admitted, "I think I've been waiting for someone to see me without all the masks I've worn. And I think I found that in you." Elena's heart ached with the purity of that confession. "I think I found that in you too," she whispered. They walked further along the shoreline, letting the waves dictate their pace. The conversation drifted effortlessly from small joys, sunsets, favorite ice cream flavors, the odd beauty of driftwood, to deeper musings on life, loss, and the courage it took to keep opening yourself to the world. At one point, a small flock of seagulls took off, wings slicing through the sky. Elena stopped to watch them, and Noah mirrored her movement. "Free, aren't they?" he said. She smiled faintly. "I think that's the kind of freedom I'm learning to want for myself." They continued walking until the tide grew stronger and the water reached their ankles. Noah bent down, scooping up a handful of wet sand. He let it trickle through his fingers, watching the grains scatter. "Everything falls where it should eventually," he said. Elena knelt beside him, doing the same, "even if it hurts at first." "Especially then," he replied. The sun began its descent, painting the sky in streaks of gold and rose. Noah and Elena sat down at the edge of the water, letting the waves wash over their feet. Neither spoke for a while, content to share the silence, each heartbeat an affirmation that they had found something rare and vital in each other. When Elena finally spoke, her voice was soft but firm. "Noah, I don't know what's coming next. I don't know if this will last, or if it will break. But I do know that right now, I feel alive. Really alive." He turned to her, eyes glistening. "That's exactly how I feel. And for the first time in so long, I'm not afraid of it." A gentle breeze carried a salty tang across the beach. Elena rested her head against his shoulder, not seeking comfort, but offering it. Noah didn't move. He simply let her presence anchor him, a mutual understanding forming without the need for words. They watched the horizon together as the first stars began to appear. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, vast and unknowable. But in that moment, it was as if the world had condensed to a single point. The connection they shared, quiet and steadfast. Noah finally whispered, "I think this is what I've been missing. Not someone to fix me, not someone to distract me, just someone to understand." Elena lifted her head, meeting his gaze. "Then we have that. And maybe that's enough to start." He nodded, and they sat side by side as the waves continued their eternal rhythm, neither needing to speak, both feeling the same quiet certainty that what they had found in each other was fragile, yes, but real. The moon rose higher, casting silver light on the wet sand. Reflections shimmered like liquid glass beneath their feet. Noah reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from Elena's face. She didn't flinch. "You're not just a memory," he sighed softly. "You're everything I want to remember." Tears pricked at her eyes, not from sadness, but from the sheer intensity of being seen, truly seen, by another soul. As night fell completely, they remained on the edge of the water, the bench abandoned behind them. It no longer mattered. They had found a space between themselves and the world, one that belonged entirely to their emotions, their shared healing, their unspoken promises. And though neither knew what the future would hold, the certainty of this moment, unshakable, intimate, and pure, would carry them forward. For the first time, Elena allowed herself to believe in beginnings again, and Noah, for the first time in years, allowed himself to hope. The tide rolled in and out, relentless and calm, much like the emotions that had brought them together. In the quiet glow of the beach town night, they discovered something rarer than love-trust, understanding, and the simple truth that some encounters were meant to mend what was broken. And as they sat there, shoulder to shoulder, letting the night envelop them, neither spoke of tomorrow. Tonight was enough. Tonight, they were whole. The morning was crisp, the kind of clarity that comes after a long storm. Clearwater Bay sparkled under the gentle sunlight, waves rolling in rhythmic perfection, as if the ocean itself approved of new beginnings. Elena arrived at the bench earlier than usual. The air smelled faintly of salt and blooming flowers from the nearby boardwalk gardens. She ran a hand along the weathered wood, the grooves familiar, comforting. This bench had witnessed the storm, the laughter, and the quiet confessions that had brought her closer to Noah than she had ever expected. Noah arrived moments later, a faint smile on his face. He didn't speak immediately. He simply offered her the same quiet presence that had become a constant in her life, solid, patient, understanding. For a long time, they sat in silence, listening to the waves. The sun painted the ocean in shimmering gold, casting reflections on the wet sand that looked like scattered stars. Finally, Elena spoke. "Do you ever think about the future?" Noah considered it. "I try not to dwell on it too much, but I do hope it's something like this. Simple, honest." Shared, she nodded, her eyes on the horizon. "I hope so, too." The bench beneath them creaked gently as they shifted. The world felt paused, a fragile bubble of peace. It had been months since the stormy nights, the heavy confessions, and the quiet walks along the shoreline. And in that time, they had learned each other's rhythms, each other's silences, each other's hearts. Noah finally reached into his pocket, pulling out the small stone he had given her weeks ago. It was a smote shaped perfectly by the sea, its surface glinting in the sunlight. He held it out to her. "I kept it," he said softly, "to remember today and everything we've gone through to get here." Elena took it, feeling its weight. "It's more than just a stone," she whispered. "It's a reminder that some things survive everything." He nodded, eyes glistening, "Just like us." She looked up at him, heart fluttering despite knowing she already understood. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "I don't want to leave this town without you knowing. I don't want to imagine a future where I don't share these moments with you. Will you continue walking this path with me? Not just today, but whatever comes next." Her chest tightened with emotion. The question wasn't just about commitment. It was about trust, about letting herself be seen completely. She reached for his hand, fingers intertwining with his. "Yes, Noah," she whispered. "I'll walk with you." They stood there for a moment, hand in hand, letting the tide wash over their feet, letting the sun warm their faces. The world felt immense, and yet perfectly small, contained in the space they had carved out together. Later that afternoon, the sky began to darken slightly. Clouds rolling in, but not threatening, just hinting at the gentle unpredictability of life. They sat on the bench again, the one that had become their anchor. Noah leaned back, letting the wind tousle his hair. "You know, I thought I'd never feel this way again. About anyone, about anything." Elena rested her head on his shoulder. "Neither did I. But here we are." A laugh escaped him, light and unburdened. "I never thought a rainy day, a stranger, and a bench could change everything." She smiled faintly, eyes closed. "I know. Sometimes the smallest things are the most unforgettable." Time seemed suspended. The waves whispered their constant rhythm, gulls circled lazily, and the distant town carried on unaware. But for Elena and Noah, This was a world entirely their own. As the evening approached, the first stars began to pierce the twilight sky. Noah pulled a small notebook from his bag, flipping it open to a blank page. "Want to draw with me?" he asked. Elena hesitated, then nodded. They sketched the horizon together, the waves, the bench, each other. The lines weren't perfect, but they didn't need to be. The imperfections mirrored life, and now, their shared story. When the sketches were done, Noah held them up. "We made this moment permanent," he said, "even if the waves wash everything else away." She laughed softly. "Not everything can be washed away." A sudden gust of wind lifted Elena's hair, and Noah brushed it gently from her face. "I think the universe has a funny way of reminding us what matters," he murmured. She nodded, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "And sometimes, it sends strangers to teach us the lessons we need most." Noah smiled faintly, squeezing her hand. "I think I understand that now." The night deepened, but neither of them felt tired. They wandered along the shoreline, watched the waves, and spoke softly about dreams and fears, knowing that they could share everything without judgment. The bench behind them stood empty now, silent witness to the story that had begun there. It had seen storms, confessions, laughter, and tears. And now, it could rest, knowing its work was done. As dawn approached once more, they sat together on the sand, wrapped in the quiet magic of the beach town, hearts unburdened, and the world open before them. Noah turned to Elena, eyes full of unspoken promises. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." She nodded, her hand in his. Together. The ocean roared gently, the night sky fading into soft pinks and golds, and in that infinite space between the waves and the horizon, they found a truth more powerful than fear, more enduring than loss, and more unforgettable than any stranger's words could ever be. They had found each other. And in that moment, the beach, the bench, and the sea became not just witnesses to their story, but eternal keepers of a love that was quiet, profound, and wholly unforgettable.